Deficit can be said to be a global phenomenon. It's very obvious in Africa and more so in Nigeria. Nigeria, no doubt, is the largest black population in the world. It is estimated to have about 180 million people. Lack of foresight, population, rural urban migration are amongst the factors that facilities in urban areas are so stretched. What can be done to forestall such, more so in Nigeria, where land for expansion is not lacking? This is the thrust of our program this morning. Thanks for joining us. The program is Frank Talk. I am Alpha Jackton. It's my honor to host a friend and an architect in person of Ene Adaji. Thank you so much for
Good
stopping by
morning.
today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
We will be looking at infrastructural deficit in the next 50 minutes or thereabout. But let's start this way. Infrastructural deficit is a phenomenon that stares at us daily as a people. And how did we get here?
Well, I think it can be captured very widely under two headings.
All right.
First and foremost, our leaders thought small at the beginning. So when we were in the oil boom and we had so much money, you know, you'd come to a place like Abuja and do 2 roads instead of 4.
That's right.
2 4 carriageways instead of 10.
And in most cases, very narrow. In most
Exactly.
instances, very narrow.
So if we're thinking ahead, if we're thinking forward, we say, okay, this is our plan for expansion, our plan for growth. We have the money now.
That's right.
Let's do it already. Instead, we've done it little,
Piecemeal.
exactly, and now we have a cash crunch.
That's right.
We're in recession. We have issues, and we're now trying to make everything inconvenient to
right.
provide
Those-
infrastructure at this late time. If you look at Dubai, Dubai was a desert. It was not populated, but they put their infrastructure in place at the beginning. So they everything grew around the infrastructure. They are not trying to keep up now. They have planned for growth. So I think small thinking ab initio was an issue.
Okay.
Of course, also, I'm going to link everything back to my favorite topic, corruption. Once there's corruption, we cannot have growth. Once there's corruption and we have men and women as institutions and not institutions as institutions, we're going to have issues. And I think that's how we found ourselves in this mess.
Well, what do you make of the state of infrastructure as it were? Let's look at Nigeria as a whole.
Well, I mean, it's deplorable. In a single word, deplorable.
When last did you travel by road?
I go to Makodi quite often.
All right.
Yes, and when I was growing up, Makodi to Abuja was 3 hours.
Yes.
And then as I grew older, it became 3.5
Half
hours. And now it's 4 hours.
That's right.
And I'm sure it's going to increase to 4.5 hours. Why?
right.
Because the road is bad. So you have to, during, was it earlier this year, there was the issue where the road cut in half.
Oh, dear.
Did you hear about that? The road between Lafia and Makodi, or Nasser and Makodi.
At some point it was splitted into half.
Exactly, because it had washed off, and we had accidents and loss of lives. Infrastructure is deplorable. Infrastructure cuts across power, health, everything.
That concerns us.
Education in particular. And
right.
it's unfortunate we're not where we should be.
You know, before we end this program, you will talk a bit about the education issue. We may even link it up with what is happening in
In
Kaduna.
Kaduna.
You know? But you know, as we go on, as far as infrastructural deficit is concerned, let's look at housing. Abuja is a place where if you don't have accommodation, in fact, in any part of the world, if you don't have accommodation, you know what that means. Abuja is a town where we have so many houses, yet so little accommodation for people.
It is unbelievable. So we do not have a housing issue. We have an accommodation issue. It does not make sense. I still think this comes to short-sightedness on the part of our leaders.
Okay?
Our city center is meant to grow. We're not to be concentrated in one small square area and expect things to happen. Now, for the city center to grow, infrastructure must grow. I should be able to live in Kubwa. I have great infrastructure. There's transportation, there's light, there's sewage, there's all those things happening. So I'm in Kubwa and I'm comfortable. and I don't have to live in the city center to reap the benefits of living well.
That's right.
Yes.
Or so it looks.
Exactly. Also, it looks so. With this housing issue, again, corruption. There are lots of people who have to put their money somewhere.
That's right.
They can't put it under the bed because it's so huge. Banks or whatever. But
You
I
put
think
up buildings.
exactly. I think housing estates are also used to launder money. So these guys are not they're not building estates for business, for the return on investment, for people to live. It's just for the money to be somewhere. So you build these houses, you price them ridiculously. It has nothing to do with the current economy. People can't afford them, people can't, but you don't care because it's not for business. It's just for money laundering. So, our infrastructure has to change. When you drive a bit out of Abuja towards Maraba and those areas, you don't believe it's part of Abuja or even close to any city.
That was actually going to be my next question. It will amaze you, and it's a third world problem. Once you leave the city center and you get to the suburbs, you wonder what happened. And normally it's just a function of seconds.
It's unbelievable.
What happens?
Unbelievable.
It appears to be a third world problem.
And you see, the funny thing is, in other places, the suburbs are seen as prestigious somewhat. You have more land,
That's
you
right.
can build bigger homes, and you can, smell the roses
Yes.
and
That's right.
we need infrastructure to make these things happen. When you go to somewhere like Maraba again, I would say, where there's nothing like, you see open gutters, there's no running water, it's terrible. It is terrible. So once we have things going on like that, you don't find a lot of people living in those areas.
That's right.
People who want to live better.
Okay.
So we move more towards the city center.
That's
The cry for infrastructure is not taking up there, and it just keeps deteriorating.
That's right.
It's a vicious cycle.
What do you make of, you're an architect, you've been around this town for a while. I want to get your personal opinion. Once you leave Abuja and you go to the area councils,
Yes.
any what comes to mind?
The area council needs to come to this century. It needs to be digitalized.
How did we miss it? What went wrong? What went wrong? There is a Federal Capital Territory Administration
Yes.
that is responsible, at least, for seeing that standards are maintained, for seeing that what needs to be done is done. But I just wonder, is it that at some point they went to sleep or what? It leaves many like me wondering what actually happened.
It all goes back to corruption. This corruption is like it's like a cockroach we need to really kill,
to do
because
away with.
because everything comes back to corruption. When our infrastructure is we have deficit, when our institutions are not working, people are trying to look out for themselves.
That's
so
right.
any avenue to do that, they're going to hold on to it, and money that is meant to service things for the public will
That's
go
right.
into someone's
Okay.
pocket
Okay.
because he needs to look out for himself. People are going to build houses. You're meant to use a certain mix, a certain ratio.
That's right.
You are trying to squeeze as much out of it to keep money in your pocket. And what comes out is substandard.
That's right.
The people who are going to check it, they're also having, everything comes back to leadership. Leadership is so key.
Can we change that? And seriously,
Absolutely.
can that be changed? Can that be
Leadership?
changed? I can see there are lots of young people that are so eager to see that, listen, we can actually get it. There are
Absolutely.
lots of young people that are willing to say, listen, if given leadership opportunities, I know we can make a whole lot of a difference.
In fact, I think now it's shifted from if given leadership, we're going to take leadership. So since we've been complaining about what's happening and we've been complaining about so many things, I think we're born for this time, and I think our time has come for us to put things in motion, take charge where we can.
That's right.
It doesn't even mean we have to take over the whole country, but
no,
in
no.
our spheres of influence,
in our spheres of
Exactly.
influence, yes,
We will-
wherever you find yourself,
absolutely.
no matter how little it is, make sure you show leadership.
Absolutely. Leadership on every level. That's what we need to instill now into the young people around us to make things change. This cannot continue.
I get worried so much about issues that bother on standards. And I can tell you there are roads I know that were built 40 years ago, and in some cases these roads are still standing. But there are roads that most times give it a lifespan of probably 10 years, and these roads are gone.
So I was speaking with my friend yesterday, and he was telling me how he visited Okene.
Good.
And
Typical example.
and he was surprised that there was running water. Now, why would you be surprised that there's running water in a town? It's something that should be.
It's basic.
Anyway, so he was surprised, and his friend was telling him that yes, there's running water. The missionaries set up the lines in 1920. Can you imagine? So those lines are still working. There's still water there because the missionaries set it up in 1920. It's when it goes back to quality, I think selflessness has to come in before we can have quality. When you have a mind for the public, for the general good, and it's not about you.
That's right.
The roads, bridges built back then, so much standard, so much quality. And then we come to this time and everything is in a decline.
That's right.
And I think our environment just contributes to it.
Okay.
Yes. If our institutions are working, for example, if we have great educational systems
That's right.
where you don't have to join all your money before you send your child to Ghana or some private university, if things were working, I think there would be less, people won't feel the need to just try to grab so much. That's what I really think.
Others tend to blame it, all right, there's no social security. But come to think of it, even wanting to grab so much, the tendency really is that if you look at it at the long run, how much do you really need? Because we live in a country where people wake up in the morning, you wear nothing, if I may use that word, and then all of a sudden you have billions in your bank
Suddenly
account,
rich.
and then you feel good about it.
It's
I've arrived. It's my time. Let me make the best of it. It's sad.
It is really sad on a very fundamental level. It is sad. Now you're saying these guys who grab so much, how much can you really grab? It's a mindset. It's a mindset that needs to shift. A mindset of I'm just thinking about me, and
The me, myself, and I
it
syndrome.
needs to change.
It's all about myself and my family.
It needs to change. And when you grow money organically, there's a respect you have for money.
Oh, sure.
When you've worked for money,
That's right.
there's money that comes to you just anyhow, and
then-
it leaves anyhow.
That's
You
right.
you have no respect for it. You
That's
spend it unbelievably. It does not make sense.
You didn't work for it anyway. so,
Absolutely.
you know.
And I think people who grab money like that are people without ideas. When a person has ideas, they cannot be hungry because those ideas, you birth them and things come out of it. But imagine that I'm in a position, I have nothing to fall back on. I have no plans. And then I have a position.
Opportunity comes.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you're at a buffet and you don't know how you're going to eat
Have
when
as
you leave
much
that.
as- that's
You
right.
will grab and you, but when you know you can grow things,
That's
the mindset changes.
Talking about the quality or talking about quality delivery, Abuja, for instance, when you see some of the estates coming up and you see the level of quality of work, as an architect, what comes to mind?
Let me tell you, and I'll be honest with you. What comes to mind is
This is Frank Talks.
so I'll be frank with you. What comes to mind for me is opportunity for business, because those estates are so poorly built. I can just come and be repairing things,
That's
you
right,
know,
gradually.
and but anyway, that aside. When you look at those estates, your heart is broken. You go to estates where the roads are so terrible.
That's if
People
they
have
roads.
people have paid you for
Roads.
the infrastructure. They have paid you for everything concerning that estate, and then you come in there on the road. It's like you are driving in the heart of your village, or you're on a horse because your car keeps going.
Going on.
It is unbelievable. You see, and then we turn around and we cry out against the government. Who is the government?
That's right.
When in this small bit,
Small-
this
the very
small
us.
area, you are showing the same thing. It is terrible. And okay, so they say doctors and architects, we spend lots of years in school because we deal directly with human beings.
That's right.
When a house falls, people die.
And
when
we have building collapse everywhere, left, right, and center.
if people can understand the impact of the things they do,
That's right.
maybe they will stop. When I see these estates, my heart, it breaks.
That's right.
It's
And unfortunately, people still go to buy these things.
they
And
need
when
to
you
leave.
buy a particular estate in this town, a friend of mine bought a property there. He raised it down to the foundation. Because when we saw it, we were like, listen, guy, are you going to live here?
No.
I don't think it's safe. This guy had to raise it down completely and started way from the foundation.
So he bought the land. He didn't buy the building.
Well, what he
even
did
though
was
he
bought
paid for the building.
even though he paid for it, because there was nothing at the end of the day to enter into such a home and yet feel safe. You have been talking about our institutions. This is one question that is very dear to my heart, and I ask everyone that I have an opportunity of hosting right where you're seated. And how can we get our institutions back on track?
How can we get our institutions back on track? The $1 million question. So, we have to take these institutions one by one and take the godfathers away from behind those institutions. So we complain about power. There are people who make money off diesel, who make money off
Importation of generators.
they make so much money off these things, It's not an option for us not to be dependent on these things.
They will do all they possibly can to
Absolutely.
make sure things don't change.
Absolutely. There are people who, once we strive for quality in our institutions, education, for instance, where we're not just trying to hire our family members from the village,
That's
or where we have ghost workers that someone is getting the money for. You know, once we start to think outside ourselves, we'll see a change for the better. Once we can also, you see, there is a mismatch between our capital expenditure and our recurring expenditure. We need to create things that will keep our economy happening so that we can invest back into our institutions.
That's
so
right.
it's a cycle. When we're spending money we don't have, we're going to get broke.
Definitely.
And we can't fund things that keep the lifeline alive. So we need to review our spending. We need to review our priorities.
That's
We
right.
need to create long-term assets that can in turn fund our
future.
institutions,
That's right.
and that will fund our future.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know.
And our economy.
Abandoned projects is another issue that this program will have to talk about. You are within that sector. Normally what happens? Normally what goes wrong? Because you see an estate, government comes to say, okay, we are going to do this, we want to do it for the people. Maybe for some reason that government is no longer in power. The person that comes over feels, no, I'm not going to complete this, I need to start my own. He starts his, he leaves without completing, and before you know it, everywhere is littered with, let's say, buildings that are not complete.
It is so sad. And you see, all these issues that we have, we can just bring them down to one or two things. Like I've been speaking about corruption, I've been talking about unbelievable selfishness. Now, when you are a leader, it's such a huge responsibility. It's an opportunity to serve. It's not really for you to come and shine.
It's not for
Yes,
self-aggrandizement.
it's exactly. It's leadership is for the people. It's not
right.
for you.
Yeah.
So I was talking to a friend last week, and was telling me how a state invited him to do a project, private, partnership and all that. And he sunk how many millions of his money into developing the estate for, I don't know if it's their civil servants or whatever. And then power changed. And then the new guys said no. And they didn't even pay him his money. So they're in court now. And those guys are even happy with the court, because every time they come to court, they get a sitting allowance from their government. So it's money back in their pockets. So this guy who came to invest, he's out on a limb.
That's right.
Houses are abandoned. Nobody's benefiting, but they're getting sitting allowance in the pocket, so they're fine. So the court can drag on for as long as they need. It does not matter. So it still comes back to selfless leadership. It is not about you.
That's right.
it's not about you. It's about the state. It's about the people. It's just unfortunate. If these people could see, when you eat everything up, what will your children come and eat?
Nothing.
Yeah, and then it's such a vicious cycle
That's
that
right.
young people don't have role models. So we are looking at these people, and people are learning bad things.
Bad
So
things.
it's sad.
Role modelship is something that is largely lacking in our society.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
We discussed that on this program some time ago. I mean, the Nigerian youths typically cannot say, okay, this person is who I want to be like.
Absolutely.
And you go back, sit down, research into how he got there. Just as you did mention, I think lack of selfless leadership,
Yeah,
lack of the understanding of the place of sacrifice.
absolutely.
In my very sober moments yesterday, I was thinking and looking, deciphering why Nigeria as a nation, blessed with so much in terms of human and natural resources, is still where it is. It's simply because nobody believes I should live for tomorrow. Nobody gives credence to, let me leave a legacy. I want it to be
Legacies,
for now,
yeah.
and then anything thereafter, it doesn't matter. I truly wish we can have a rethink, and I truly wish we can have a mindset, or change in mindset in this country.
The key word there, the magic word there, legacy, something that lives on.
Lives beyond you.
Exactly. That's what we have not grasped yet.
To a large
Yes.
extent, that is largely lacking, and that is why things are what they are in this country.
Yes.
If you look at how much have been stolen from this country, we can actually make Nigeria, if it were possible, to bring it back, and we put it into infrastructure. To be very honest with you, I want to believe Nigeria will be the Synosia of the world.
I agree.
Everybody will want
I
to come
agree
here
with you. I
because
agree.
we have what it takes.
Absolutely.
Beautiful
Absolutely.
landscapes. When you travel this country by road, you know that you're so blessed
Honestly.
to come from the country Nigeria.
Honestly.
But the problem is we blunder these things ourselves.
Absolutely.
So sad.
And how about the people? I mean, as a resource, the people of Nigeria are unbelievable. We're so resilient. We're hardworking people.
Very innovative.
Exactly.
Hard-thinking people.
We're amazing people.
That's right.
And
But
we're
yet,
letting ourselves down.
Leadership.
Yes.
Leadership seems to be the gap.
But we're letting ourselves down. We need to vote for our leadership. We need to put the people we trust in place. That's it.
Anambra is not far away from where we are. In the next few days, Anambra elections will come up. I hope that people like IPOP will allow peace reign. I hope there will be free and fair elections in Anambra State. And we hope that whoever wins is not coming for self-aggrandizement, but is coming to make the lives of the people better.
I can only say amen to that.
That's a good one. As we move on,
Yes.
let's look at education. I and you are aware of what has been happening in Kaduna State.
Yes, very much so.
Now you tell me, what's your take?
Well, was pretty brave of El Rufai, I would say. I think we're taking a step in the right direction
Okay.
because lots of times things like this happen and it does not see the light of day.
That's right.
Now, the best thing you can give to your child is an education.
That's right.
I say to all the architects who come to work with me, the biggest thing you have is your exposure.
That's right.
And how do you get exposed? Education is your mind. We've turned out well. We were educated by the missionaries. I went to Catholic primary school, secondary school.
I went to a mission school. too.
Exactly. We were not paying $10,000
I had all British teachers except one that taught me English.
and apart from the subjects they're teaching you more.
Morals.
Yes, they're giving you quality.
That's true.
You're becoming a quality individual who learns to look at things a certain way.
Most of us are who we are today because of the foundation that was laid.
Absolutely. So education cannot be overemphasized. Foundation is key. It is the stepping stone to everything and anything. Our educational institutions, as long as, okay, so let me digress a bit. As a people, I don't know what the issue is with our brains. There's something I always say: black girls don't blush we don't blush normally.
Okay.
You see, but in our makeup, we're blushing. In our makeup, we're moving as far away from ourselves as we can.
That's right.
And I see it in our mentality. I don't know if we feel we are inferior in any way, but we always believe that what is outside is best.
Better.
We are very elitist,
Yeah.
where we see that. I mean, we're very elitist.
But you know, it's so funny that sometimes, just like by way of digression, the makeup thing you talked about, sometimes you look for your friends and you can't find them, but they are the people you're talking to because they've so changed.
I'm going to come. I'm going to come to that shortly. I mean, makeup is not a bad thing, but this mindset of we're moving as far away from ourselves as we can
That's
in,
right.
in everything.
That's
So
right.
we believe everything outside is better.
The grass
Education
greener-
is a
the
yes.
grass is greener on the
As
other side.
long as we have, and education outside is not necessarily bad, but when it's at the expense of what's happening at home, then we have an issue.
That's right.
If we have great institutions of learning at home and we choose to go and study out of the country,
Fine.
it's fantastic.
Exposure.
But when our people in charge,
That's right.
we send our kids out, even in Nigeria, you know, we put so much emphasis on outside is better. We're not going to grow our institutions, and the people here will keep declining except you can afford to go somewhere else.
That's true.
And it's terrible. So our mindset needs to change. Our elitist mindset, where we always have to show our neighbor that we're better because we've done this, we go here, we have this, we look like this,
Like
we
this,
talk like
like
this.
this.
We're always going to run away from our homegrown, and we're going to have an issue.
I think the way to capture what you just said is you can't even find yourself because you have become someone else.
It's unbelievable. You know, I wanted to share an experience, but it's highly
Confidential.
so. You know, it's you go somewhere now, right?
Yeah.
And you are the last dark girl standing because we're so focused on.
Bleached skins.
Well, that's a different topic. It's a highly controversial topic.
Well,
so maybe another time we'll talk
Alright,
about it
that-
frankly.
Yeah.
Anyway,
The Kaduna issue,
yes,
as it were. I want to believe you gave El-Rufai a thumbs up.
yes, I believe so.
A lot of people are not happy, but I don't understand what they are talking
Why?
about.
Why they have?
I have taken a position. This is a program, and ideally, professionally, you're not really supposed to have a say. But I have a say. This is one thing the Kaduna State Governor has done that I think is a step in the right direction.
I believe so.
But a lot of people are fighting it.
Why?
People think it's political. People think, this guy. I think it takes a lot of guts for him to have done what he did.
Absolutely.
Because if what we are truly seeing is a reflection of the quality of teachers that we have, then what are you teaching the future? I mean, we have gotten to a stage in Nigeria where graduates cannot write employment letters. We see it.
Yes.
And you wonder how we got here.
Yes.
In some instances, these are people that they even went to the so-called private schools. How did we get here?
Absolutely.
As a class 3 pupil,
I agree.
way back, in class 3, I knew how to write a formal and an informal letter.
Yeah.
We were taught these things. What is happening today? When technology is even better than, we never had laptops in our days. We never had these things in our
Yeah.
days, but these things are all there. We expect that society, we expect that education should actually be better.
I agree with you. I mean, I remember dictation in those days.
Yes.
And you know, even as far back as
Do you
that
think
time,
they still do it?
I don't think so. Even as far back as that time, we were importing teachers because I had Ghanaian teachers.
Teachers, yes.
I remember dictation where you had to spell these words,
That's right.
long words,
Long
and
words.
you know, as an employer of labor, see, my heart keeps breaking all the time.
Because I know you see stuff.
It is just unbelievable. You have people who come out of school who don't have a clue. They cannot write letters. They're not spelling well. You can. It's terrible, and that's
When
our
you
future.
go to the social media, you see a lot of abbreviations. These abbreviations, I know, is aimed at, I belong to one of these groups on the social media, and one thing we have as one of our sacrosanct rules is no abbreviations. If you don't know how to spell it, we understand. But stop doing,
Even
stop
though-
playing smart.
So let me give you the flip side of the coin. Someone said language is evolving. And they said to me that because I was also like all this abbreviation and all this, it's spoiling the English. And they said to me that old English was different from our English now.
Agreed.
For instance, I believe old was OLDE as opposed to OLD now.
Yeah.
And that it is evolving. So what they're saying essentially is that there's a new language coming up. And we can just watch and see.
Well, as it is, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think that's really the way to go.
I agree.
Let's talk about transportation. It's all part of infrastructure.
Yeah.
Abuja is one town where anytime it rains, that's something I found out. While driving home at night, you see lots of stranded passengers. That is one aspect of infrastructure that the administration seems not to have in place. What can we do about that issue? Certainly everybody cannot own cars. These buses are there. Sometimes you may stand under the bridge for 1 hour, for 2 hours waiting for a bus to take you to Kubwa or to take you to one of the satellite towns, and most times they are not there.
Imagine if we had trains. Just this ordinary rail from Kaduna to Abuja has made such a difference.
Great impact, I
Yes.
understand.
When I was growing up I grew up in Makurdi where I was born.
Yeah,
We had rail tracks.
that's true.
And I remember then that sometimes they would shut the road so the trains could
Can't
pass.
Yeah.
I don't know what the trains were carrying in those days, whether they were carrying people or whatever. But the point is, that is a great resource that we should not be overlooking.
That's true.
So, we should have train systems.
The train system, I'll tell
Yes.
you something about it. When we were growing up, for you to transport oil, that is petrol, it was the trains that did it in those days. And that was why I want to believe our roads lasted longer. When it came to haulage, it was the trains that did it from the
Yeah.
port entry points to the other parts of the country. But when trailers took over, our roads
Yeah.
started
Yeah.
feeling the brunt of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that is actually one of the reasons why our roads in Nigeria are what they are today.
We should have dedicated truck routes. That's what we should have ideally, where just trucks are plying those routes.
That's right.
That's what we should have. We should have roads where there's a minimum tonnage.
That's right.
There's
allowed.
exactly.
Yes.
So many of these things.
I also want to believe that if the train system works properly, to a large extent, it will take care of most of these problems.
Absolutely.
Our roads will last longer, and you will discover that when it comes to issues that bother on haulage, it will even be cheaper. Because it's actually cheaper for you to transport these things by rail from a place like Lagos than for you to transport them
Exactly.
there by road.
In fact, I'll tell you something else. The quality of life will even get better.
That's
So
true.
I could decide to live in Makurdi or
Yes.
Calabar.
Yeah.
No, Makurdi.
Makurdi.
And commute, because I think Calabar will be further. And commute to Abuja.
That's right.
Just if it's 4 hours by road, maybe an hour and a half by train.
that's right.
At the end of the day, you go back
You
home,
go back home.
where it's easier to live. Your expenditure is
It's
not as much.
cheaper,
Exactly,
as-
and maybe you want that quality of life for your
That's-
kids and
that's
all of
right,
that. So
that's right.
it will make such an impact because everything will actually become better.
A friend of mine told me that the best way to handle issues as regards the empty houses we have, most especially in the highbrow areas in Abuja, is to see that we tax those houses heavily. Tell me, as a professional, does that add up?
Okay, so let me take you back just a bit. There was a time they increased the CFO per square meter for land.
Okay, off air, I will tell you how that happened. I was there the day the minister
terrible.
decided on that.
It was just so terrible.
Yes.
And for me, the way I saw it was they were just raising money for something,
That's right.
whether it was for election or raising money for whatever.
It's just part
And
of it.
at the end of the day, the end user, the people who live in those houses would be the people who would pay at the end of the day.
That's right.
Now, these houses that are standing, it belongs to the
The
same
so-called-
group of people.
That's right.
So, you still will not fight against your own. When you come and you say, okay, tax it, you're going to have to find those people.
That's
Then
right.
you're going to have, I don't know if it's,
The
I don't know if it's
CFO
going to work.
issue, I won't say the minister's name, but
I'm aware of the minister.
the week that thing happened, we were at his place. He invited us for a ministerial briefing. And he cited an example where somebody made 200 million naira from just one deal. I think this guy was given a parcel of land to sell for 1 billion. He was able to sell it for 1.2 billion. The 200 million, of course, came to the
In
guy.
his pocket.
But as far as the minister was concerned, was if you can make that kind of money as
Guy on the
profit
road.
and what have you, it means land is cheap. And that was what brought that issue up. To people like us, it didn't make sense. Because all you were doing was you were disenfranchising millions
Absolutely.
from owning property in Abuja.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I think that with this taxing issue, when you tax those houses, the money that will be raised,
That's right.
it will still go to nefarious activities. It will still not come out for anything good. So it's just a vicious cycle. Those people are your friends anyway, so you guys will even settle
find your way
behind
of-
exactly. But even when that money is raised, it's like that parking on the road scam. It was such a scam.
It was a big scam.
A huge scam.
And the money, nobody ever knew what
Exactly.
happened to the money.
Not accounted for it. We
Yes.
don't know what's been done with it.
We
It
were
was
told
just
they
to
raised
raise
over
money.
6 billion.
Just for what? It's so once there is this selfishness and looking out for yourself, nothing is going to grow. It's just going to be terrible. Another thing about infrastructure, our economy has to be vibrant. And there's something that's happening now. I think small businesses, small and medium,
scale.
yeah, we're feeling the brunt of what's happening.
That's right.
Truth is, the economy is driven by this segment.
Same.
We employ over 70% of labor. We keep the blood running, right? We employ people that the bigger corporations will not even employ.
Sure.
Exactly. Our economy needs to keep running. Now, when the government, I'm sure you're aware of the T-bills, the treasury bills now.
Yeah.
When the government tells you to bring your money and they're going to give you 18% back,
Back.
all the money is being mopped up in that direction. Because which business are you going to do and you return 18% and all of that? And even that money, we don't know what's happening. It's not being, are you using it to drive a sector of the economy or something? Because once you mop this money out, you're killing lifeblood. You're draining the lifeblood of the economy.
That's right.
Right? People are not, work is not going on, projects are not happening,
happening.
everything is stalling,
That's right.
nothing is, and it comes to a standstill because businesses also drive infrastructure.
I want to believe the way we think, our very elitist way of thinking, we often would think at the bigger picture, forgetting that, listen, it's in the small things that
Absolutely.
these things happen. If you go to a site, from the woman who fries akara, to the guy who comes to carry block,
Yeah.
the guy who carries cement, it's prosperity you're creating.
Absolutely.
The lady who comes to sell coke, who comes to sell bread.
Yeah.
But once that doesn't happen, and that is where the thing really
Absolutely.
is. It's not in, all right, you give a multinational a
Absolutely.
huge project. At the end of the day, money is taken out, investment surplus, at the expense of,
Exactly.
but I don't know why our thinking just wouldn't change.
It has to change. It has to change.
Leadership.
Leadership is the core of every single thing because fail or win, it comes back to the leadership.
Now you tell me, what do you want to see? Because I know this is something that is very passionate to you. I am also very passionate about it. What kind of leadership should we look forward to?
You should look for vibrant leadership. Leadership that is thinking about tomorrow, not short-sighted, far-sighted. We want Nigeria this huge, and this is what we're going to work to create. Not tying ourselves down and saying, oh, how can we do this? We have to create opportunities for our people. Leadership that looks past itself. Because leadership is a call to serve. It's not a call to enrich yourself. It's not a call to make your family great for the rest of its life. It is to serve. And at the end of the day, you will pay for what you take from the people. Anyhow. Yes. So when you've been called to lead, you're called to guide your people, to provide a great environment for your people, do things for your people, not to take away from them.
The Senate a few weeks ago gave a nod to the independent candidacy thing that a lot of people have been clamoring for. Do you think that will further expand the political space?
Absolutely. I mean, it means that I think godfatherism, I don't know if that's a word, or is it a Nigerian word. I think it also, well, I think it has an impact on our politics.
You know, the whole idea is that the Godfather thing, you understand, is a global phenomenon. But in our own case, it's the way we do
our
it.
own has a different thing to it, and it's at the expense of the people
That's
so
right.
much.
Because I intend to sponsor you, and whatever comes to you at the end of every month, more so when everybody runs to Abuja to collect money, it's not as if it is internally generated revenue. You are going to give me 5% every month. That kind of a thing. Whatever comes in, 5% automatically comes to you. That is the kind of godfatherism that we have in most instances.
It's
and that is what
unfortunate.
makes it unfortunate.
It's unfortunate. Once we are just answerable to the people. So in business, right, if you have 2 clients that are funding your business, they're giving you work to do, and they pull out, you're going to collapse.
Definitely.
If you've not laid your infrastructure.
In place.
If you're answerable to the market and you're providing something the market needs,
Service.
you'll be relevant.
Quality service.
You don't need. So I think our politics needs to shift. When we have this 1 or 2 people behind us, they are actually pulling the strings of how things are going to happen.
That's right.
We're answerable to them at the expense of our people. We need to shift and be answerable to our people. And I think the independent candidature is going to help us do that.
Do you think youths will really play a role when it comes to, let's say, okay, let's see if we can kind of distance ourselves from the way we used to do things. Let's see if we can try something new. Do you think the Nigerian youth can be found to fill in that space?
I think it is happening. And when 1 or 2 states, 3 states, when we make it happen and other young people begin to see,
And then we see that it is working.
I think people will come on board. Now, for the Buhari election time, most people would say we're between a rock and a hard place. And then Buhari won. It's not a complete, I know people are complaining now, but it's not a complete disaster in the sense that the people learned something, that they had a voice then,
That's right.
we have a voice, that the people can actually come together and vote someone and that person will be empowered.
That's true.
So, with that in mind, I think we can still make it happen. And I think the youth, they are becoming, in social media language, woke. There's an awakening.
That's true.
Yes.
Well, as we finally round up, the Anambra elections, what would you want to see?
Free and fair elections. That's all I can say
All right.
on this Anambra election, as we're just watching to see how everything unfolds.
Are you worried? The threats of IPOB and all that?
Well, I wouldn't say worried. Things play out, and then on this Anambra election, it's more or less.
Let's just pray that everything turns out to be free and fair.
Yes, I really hope for that, and we'll see.
Well, Ene, thank you so much for taking time out to share your thoughts and your perspectives with us on infrastructural deficit, as it were.
Yes.
As I've always said, Nigeria is the only country we have. If we have a rethink, if we can fine-tune our mindset to know that it's not all about the me, myself, and I phenomenon, but it's also about the future of this country. What kind of future do we intend to bequeath to our children?
Yes.
We all will do the right thing. We don't need to steal everything that belongs to the Commonwealth. Come on, if you are innovative, you can become a billionaire, not via primitive accumulation. That's where we'll end it on today's program, Frank Talk. Do join us tomorrow for yet another interesting episode. Ene, thank you very much.
Thank you for
Thanks
having
for
me.
sharing your last 50 minutes with us. My name is Alpha Jackton.